This is a debrief of day 50 of my GMAT Prep. As of this point, I am exactly 3 days away from my final GMAT exam. In this video, I will share my performance and learnings from taking the official GMAT Practice Exam number 5 from MBA.com. If you have been following my prep, you know that this is my second attempt on this practice exam. I previously took this exam on day 45 of my GMAT Prep and scored 745, which is a 100th percentile score. With that said, let me talk about how I did today. My score on this practice exam today was 715, which is a 99th percentile score. My section-wise scores in percentile terms were 100th percentile on Quant, 98th percentile on verbal, and 90th percentile on data insights. Unfortunately, my overall score dropped from 745 to 715, but the good thing is that I still hit a 99th percentile score, which is on target for me. Even before I get into details of my performance on this practice exam, I want to mention that one thing I struggled with on this day was not having sufficient sleep. Obviously, that adversely affected the quality of energy and attention which I was able to invest into the exam. Let's look at my performance on each section. On the quant section, I answered all questions correctly. That's a good thing because I have been struggling with that over the last few practice exams. I did spend some extra time on a few questions here and there in validating my solutions, but those were cases where such rechecks were warranted. On the verbal section, the lack of sleep hit my information holding capability, or in other words, my short-term memory. While I ended up with a decent score, part of that might just be luck. Overall, I answered 2 questions incorrectly. Question 4 was a reading comprehension question. I misread one of the options on this one. Combined with my emphasis on velocity and the fact that this passage was more mathematical than the typical reading comprehension passage, I ended up making an error and solving the question incorrectly. This was an avoidable mistake. Question 23 was a critical reasoning question. On this one, I made an error with applying the principle that first-degree relationships must be preferred over second-degree relationships. Like the error I made on the last practice exam, this was also because I did not interpret one of the answer options accurately. I can't think of a reliable way to avoid mistakes like this, even if I had infinite time on my hand. On the data insight section, I answered 6 questions incorrectly. I made a time management error and invested too much time on the first question. I spent 5 minutes there and as a result was squeezed on time throughout the rest of the section. The time management error was an indirect result of lack of sleep, which does influence your ability to implement behavioral principles, which you need to do well on to get a decent score on the GMAT. Despite over-investing time on the first question, I answered it incorrectly. Moving to question 4, I had to skip this one because it got too complicated for me. Fortunately, I was able to revisit it after the end and alter my answer. Yet, I still got it wrong. On question 5, I was the victim of GMAT's no partial credit rule on the data insight section. I answered one of the 3 parts of the question incorrectly in this case. On questions 9, 12 and 13, I made avoidable mistakes which I could have prevented with better quality attention and energy management. Besides these questions, I also made a mistake of spending more time than necessary on question 18, which was a graphics interpretation question. In summary, my performance on the data insight section was most heavily affected by poor sleep and energy management on my part, which in turn also affected my ability to manage time on this section. The biggest lesson from the practice exam today is to ensure that you get enough sleep before your final GMAT exam. Being in a predictable environment and following a predictable schedule will help you with that. That is all for today. I will see you in the next video.